Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker. I want to continue on with a speech that I started last week looking at the Abbott government's desire to get rid of penalty rates. And last week I drew links between the North Sydney Forum, John Hart from the Catering and Restaurant Association and Mr Joe Hockey. And as we know, Mr Hockey wrote the terms of reference for the Productivity Commission inquiry. And this week I want to continue my remarks around penalty rates, but really look at penalty rates from a worker's perspective. And certainly the government is determined to cut penalty rates. Don't believe the weak assurances they may give. We need to just look at their actions. And if the Abbott government is really not interested in cutting and taking away penalty rates, it would have specifically quarantined them from the Productivity Commission review, which of course it hasn't. The Productivity Commission has a free range to examine all aspects of work. In fact, the entire workplace relations framework is under the Productivity Commission spotlight. The Abbott government has demonstrated time and time again it doesn't understand penalty rates. If it did, it would not be on the destructive path to reduce the take-home pay of around 4.5 million working Australians. Millions of Australians rely on their penalty rates to make ends meet, to pay the bills, to educate and care for their children and to look after their families. And most of us rely on penalty rate workers to deliver out-of-hours and weekend services. But the Abbott government has demonstrated by its actions it simply doesn't understand this. And the Prime Minister went even further when he said to penalty rate workers, if you don't want to work on a weekend, then fair enough, don't. What a ridiculous statement to make, and it shows once again how out of touch the Prime Minister and his government are. There are very, very few areas of our community that don't rely on the services provided out of hours or on the weekend, and I want to give voice to these workers and the services they provide. I've taken these comments from the United Voice submission to the Productivity Commission inquiry into the workplace relations framework. It's a publicly available document, and it's about time the government took a long, hard look at it and made their view clear on penalty rates. I'd like to start by quoting from Erica, a nurse from Western Australia. I'm the sole breadwinner in this household. I'm a nurse. The work I do is hard work. It's caring for others. It's being there at odd times when others have knocked off. It's missing out on friends and family. There's no work-life balance anymore. The penalty rates keep our head above water. Knowing I have job security is one of the things I truly value, and I'm not alone in this. There are so many others like me. We don't and we can't go backwards. After working so hard for what we've earned, please don't make things any harder. And I'd now like to put the voice of Naomi, a casino worker from New South Wales, on the record. With 3 children, working weekends is my only option for our household to survive. To be working in an industry that operates 24/7, weekends being the busiest time, I have sacrificed on children's birthdays, family functions and sports just to make ends meet. Penalty rates have helped tremendously. Take penalty rates away and it means more time away from my children and daycare that we simply cannot afford. Margaret Ann, an aged care worker from Western Australia. We get a poor wage for the work our job in the aged care sector entails, and I'll add, before we go on to hear from Margaret Ann, that Margaret Ann probably earns between $19 and $21 an hour without her penalty rates, and I suspect she works part-time, around 30 hours per week. Margaret Ann goes on to say, working public holidays and late nights are part and parcel of what we do, and we have no option but to work these shifts and days. So please give us appropriate remuneration for this. What we do, it's more than a job. Please allow us a living wage. one with job security and the means to pay our bill. And if I just refer back to the Prime Minister's words, when he said to workers like Margaret Ann, fair enough, if you don't want to work weekends, then don't. So if Margaret Ann stops working weekends, who cares for aged Australians that she looks after on the weekends and on night shift? How does the Prime Minister even contemplate that that work would be done if the Margaret Anns of the world didn't give up their home time and do that valuable work? Lindy, a hospital services worker from Western Australia. We don't choose to work odd hours, we have to. Unfortunately, sick people don't go home at 5:30 every night. And again, Lindy's words just show how out of touch the Prime Minister is. Does he seriously think hospitals close at 5:30? Or does he think they staff themselves? I mean, who looks after the sick in our emergency hospitals if it's not people like Lindy? Kirstine, a hospitality worker from Victoria. Do you realise what it's like not to be there for your family and friends when they need you? Do you get to enjoy your Christmas Day, Easter? Do you know what it's like to struggle financially? Without my penalty rates, I don't think that I'd be able to pay my bills, let alone little luxuries. And Lara, a partner of a penalty rate worker. I spend Christmas Eve alone, and on Christmas morning my children sat waiting for their dad to come home from work before opening their presents. People like my husband who work in our emergency services give up a great deal to do their job. Cutting their pay through removing penalty rates is no way to thank them for the job that they do. Rhonda from Victoria asks the Prime Minister, could you live on $45 a day after tax? It doesn't pay the bills or even put enough food on the table, so a Sunday shift penalty rate is a means of survival occasionally. Colin from Security Services in the ACT. It's hard enough to live with penalty rates. Without them, it would be impossible. Jackie, another hospital services worker from Western Australia. The loss of penalty rates would be a major blow to me. I am a 60-year-old widow. What I earn is what I have to live on. I work in the country. There's no public transport, so I have to drive 60 kilometres each day to get to my workplace. Penalty rates help to offset the fuel costs. And where is the National Party on this? What's their view on penalty rates? Are they standing with the Prime Minister and Minister Abbott in calling for penalty rates to be abolished? Because if they're not, it is time to sever those links and to stand up for workers like Jackie, who drive 60 kilometres a day to work in a hospital, and her penalty rates are precious to her. She's a single earner, and that penalty rate goes to put the fuel in the tank of petrol that she needs to get to work. So make no mistake, this is a deliberate attempt by the Abbott government to attack penalty rates for working Australians. And they're not even being honest about it. They're doing it under the guise of the Productivity Commission. And no doubt the Productivity Commission, with the terms of reference written by the Treasurer, Mr Hockey, for his mates in the hospitality industry, will come out and say there needs to be some curtailing of penalty rates. I've no doubt that will be the outcome. And the Abbott government will be standing there saying, oh, not us, not us. The Independent Productivity Commission has suggested this, and so we want to go ahead and do this. Well, 4.5 million working Australians, low-paid Australians, that's who the Abbott government will be cutting. And we've seen already what a harsh, cruel government the Abbott government is. And penalty rates, whether the Abbott government wants to be upfront in their attack on them or whether it wants to hide behind the Productivity Commission, are well and truly under the spotlight of this harsh, cruel government. Well, 4.5 million Australians thankfully work and they vote, and they know very clearly who supports their penalty rates and who doesn't. So let's see what the Productivity Commission recommend and what the Abbott government does when finally it will be exposed on its true agenda of reducing penalty rates for 4.5 million working Australians.